Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In this episode, we will look at Germany's plans for the conquered eastern territories following the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, which took Russia out of the war in early 1918.
And now they had the opportunity to work on a plan that had really been set out in 1915 in a book by Friedrich Naumann, a German that had written a piece called Mitteleuropa, in which he suggested that Germany's geopolitical future was an ever stronger alliance with Austria-Hungary, and that in this part of Europe, in these conquered territories, you could say in this Lebensraum, even though that was
a phrase yet to come.
A phrase yet to be popularized in Germany. But the idea was very similar. It was basically that the colonies which Germany during the 19th century, when they were also looking for their place in the sun, as it was called, in this quest for colonies in the south, it was never really enough. They were late to the party, so to say, and all the best territories had already been taken. So instead they saw their chance in this part of Europe, and this would be an economy that was, if not more ruthless than what had taken place in some of the colonies, especially in places such as Congo, for example. At least it would be something on a very similar scale. It would be absolute maximization of benefits and profit going back to Germany, while these areas would be impoverished and people would be practically working as slave laborers. This was naturally not a vision that would in any way make the people of this part of Europe enthusiastic about the German rule. But still, the Germans, they kept trying to wiggle this carrot in front of the faces of people in this part of Europe. So this work that had been set in motion with the establishment of the Provisional Council in Poland in 1916, it continued in 1917, and then finally in 1918 it really took shape. But by then it was too late. On October 15th in 1918, the so-called Regency Council was created, a further step up on the ladder of on the path to Polish autonomy. This was it was said that it would be a constitutional monarchy that would still be closely tied to Germany. But at this point in the war, the Poles knew what was coming, and they gladly took this additional administrative power that was handed to them. But they didn't really want to make any obligations toward the Germans. They would rather wait out the war. Then finally, on November 6th, negotiations had already started between the Germans and the Western Allies. They hadn't reached the moment for any form of for anybody to lie down their weapons just yet, but everybody knew that something was about to happen. So on November 6th, Ignacy Daszyński, a socialist leader, declared an independent Polish government in Lublin. He chose as his the man responsible for the army and for the military would be later General Śmigły-Rydz, that in the final years of interwar Poland was the Polish leader from 1935 to 1939. He made his big debut, you could say, on the Polish scene back then. And Daszyński's government was against the government that this Regency Council that had been created by the Germans, and more really represented the landowning aristocracy. At the same time, you had Roman Dmowski in Paris, the leader of the nationalist Endecja group, that had created his own, you could say, government in exile that was just waiting for a peace conference and to be given the reins of Poland. But on November 10th, Piłsudski and his right-hand man Kazimierz Solskowski had been released from the Magdeburg fortress, and they made their way back to Poland by train, arriving on November 10th, being greeted by enormous masses at the central station of Warsaw. And with his popularity, it was apparent to everyone that neither the government in Lublin nor anybody from the Regency Council, Dmowski, even though his group had large support, he was not in the country. There was nobody else than Piłsudski that could take power. And on November 11th, Armistice Day in the West, the day when the guns went silent, in Poland, the Poles, they started disarming the German troops that were still in Warsaw, and all power was transferred by the Regency Council to Piłsudski. However, the coming years would still be very difficult despite peace returning to Western Europe. In this part of Europe, there was still some fighting to be done. The Red Army that had been created after the Bolsheviks had taken power in October 1917 started. Naturally, there was immediately a civil war starting in Russia between the Whites and the Reds. But the Reds started gaining more and more territorial ambitions. Initially, Lenin had agreed that any nationality that had been part of the Russian Empire, if they had a piece of territory in which they constituted the ethnic majority and they wanted independence, they would be able to decide on their future on their own. But with time, appetite grew, and quickly these Soviet councils were created in Ukraine. There was an attempt in Finland, in the Baltic states, in Belarus and Lithuania, and it was clear that the Russian Soviet the Red Army was sending military aid to these other Soviets, leading to an all-out war in this part of Europe. By early 1918, Poland realized that they would also get involved in this. The first fighting, though, started really with the Ukrainians, and that was even before Armistice Day, so before the First World War came to an end. It started immediately at the start of November with battles for the city of Lviv, or Lviv as it is known today. Initially, the Ukrainians were quite successful, took over quite large parts of the city, but Poles still hung on to key positions. The Poles had the benefit of forming a majority of the population in the city, 70% or so, with large minorities of Jews and Armenians that were also more friendly towards the Poles than the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians had a majority in the surrounding areas outside the city. But they poured into the city and still managed to put up quite a good fight in the first few days, but then the tide started turning. However, there were still many months left before the Poles defeated what was the so-called Western Ukrainian People's Republic. There was also a Ukrainian People's Republic that had been created a little bit further to the east, centered around Kiev. On January 22nd, 1919, these two merged into what was supposed to become one independent Ukraine. But soon thereafter, Poland took the entire territory that had been claimed by the Western Ukrainian People's Republic, and only the Ukrainian People's Republic was left.
Adam, sorry, I'm just going to have to stop you there. As usual, the clock has defeated us, but we will pick it up next time. There we are. I've had to stop Adam almost in mid-sentence, but not quite on this occasion. Don't worry, if you join us next time on Poland Daily History, as we hope you will, we'll pick up the story. Until then, thank you for watching and look forward to seeing you next time on Poland Daily History.